The rain had been falling for 3 hours. When Andrew Martinez first saw the gates of Thornwick Estate through his cracked windshield, water dripped steadily through a hole in his car roof, landing on the passenger seat where his sister Maria's medical files lay scattered like fallen leaves. The papers were damp now, the ink slightly smeared, but the words remained clear enough to read: Stage 4, 6 months. Experimental treatment available. Andrew turned off the engine and sat in the darkness, listening to the rain drum against metal. His phone showed 2 missed calls from Maria and 17 from the hospital billing department. He didn't need to listen to the voicemails to know what they said. The experimental treatment that could save his sister's life would cost $400,000. Money he didn't have. Money no bank would lend him. Money that existed in only one place he could reach: the Thornwick family fortune. 3 weeks ago, Andrew had been a construction supervisor in Phoenix, living paycheck to paycheck but honest work. Then Maria got sick and everything changed. She was only 24, just started her career as a teacher, had her whole life ahead of her. The doctors spoke in careful, measured tones about options and realistic expectations, but Andrew heard only one thing: his sister was going to die unless he found a way to pay for treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. That's when he remembered the old family stories his grandmother used to tell. Stories about his great-grandfather, Roberto Martinez, who had worked as groundskeeper at Thornwick Estate back in 1952. Roberto had been more than an employee, according to the stories. He had been trusted with family secrets, had even loaned money to old Hamilton Thornwick during some business trouble. Money that was never repaid. Money that, with interest over 70 years, would be worth exactly what Maria needed now. Andrew had spent 2 weeks in dusty archives and record halls, following paper trails and hunting down documents. What he found surprised him. The stories weren't just family folklore. Roberto Martinez had indeed loaned Hamilton Thornwick $45,000 in 1952, documented in a handwritten promissory note that still existed in the county records office. The note included a clause that if Thornwick died before repayment, the debt would transfer to his estate with compound interest. Hamilton Thornwick had died in 1953. The current value of that debt, calculated with standard compound interest rates, came to just over $400,000. Andrew had consulted with 3 different lawyers, and all agreed. Legally, he had a claim against the Thornwick estate. The problem was proving it in court would take years, and Maria didn't have years. So Andrew had driven from Phoenix to Virginia, hoping to reason with the current head of the Thornwick family, Eleanor Thornwick. She was Hamilton's granddaughter, now 68 years old, and the sole heir to the family fortune. Andrew had called her office 14 times, written 6 letters, even tried showing up at her lawyer's office downtown. Every door was closed to him. Every request was denied. The Thornwick family wanted nothing to do with some construction worker from Arizona claiming their grandfather owed his grandfather money. But Andrew wasn't ready to give up. Not when Maria was getting sicker every day. He pulled out his phone and looked at the last text message from his sister. "Don't do anything stupid, Andy. I'll be okay either way." But she wouldn't be okay. And Andrew couldn't live with himself if he didn't try everything. The Thornwick estate sat on 200 acres of Virginia countryside, surrounded by stone walls that were built in 1847. The main house was a sprawling Tudor Revival mansion with 43 rooms, according to the real estate articles Andrew had found online. Eleanor Thornwick lived there alone, except for a small staff and private security team that patrolled the grounds. Andrew had spent the last 3 days watching the estate from different positions around the perimeter. He learned the security patterns, the guard rotations, the times when the house was most quiet. The guards walked the grounds every 2 hours, but they followed predictable routes. There were gaps in the coverage, especially along the eastern wall where old oak trees created shadows that the floodlights couldn't penetrate. What Andrew needed was in the house itself. Eleanor Thornwick's late husband had been a meticulous record keeper, according to the local historical society. If there were any documents that could support Andrew's claim, they would be in the estate's private study on the 3rd floor. Andrew wasn't planning to steal anything, just photograph whatever evidence might exist and use it to force a legal settlement. It wasn't breaking and entering if he didn't take anything, he told himself. It was just trespassing, maybe. A misdemeanor at worst. Andrew checked his watch. 2:34 a.m. The guards had finished their midnight patrol 20 minutes ago. The next one wouldn't start until 4:30. He had a window of opportunity, but he needed to move fast. He got out of his car, pulling up the hood of his dark jacket. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, which was good. It would muffle any sounds he might make. In his backpack, he carried a small flashlight, his phone for taking pictures, a multi-tool, and a first aid kit. He wasn't planning to get hurt, but his construction experience had taught him to be prepared for anything. The eastern wall was 8 feet tall, built from local fieldstone that provided natural handholds. Andrew had climbed more challenging surfaces on construction sites. He approached the wall carefully, staying in the shadows of the oak trees. The security cameras were positioned to watch the main approaches to the house, but this section was blocked by tree cover. Andrew found a section where the mortar between stones had weathered away slightly, giving him better grip. He pulled himself up slowly, testing each handhold. His boots found purchase on small ledges in the stone. Within 2 minutes he was at the top of the wall. The view from above showed him the estate grounds spread out in the darkness below. Floodlights illuminated the main lawn and the circular driveway, but large sections remained in shadow. The house itself was dark, except for a few security lights at the entrances. Andrew could see the motion sensors mounted on poles around the property, their red indicator lights blinking slowly. He dropped down on the other side of the wall, landing in soft earth beside a flower bed. Immediately, he crouched low and listened. Nothing but rain and the distant sound of wind through trees. He was inside the grounds now, but the hard part was still ahead. The third-floor study had 3 windows facing the east side of the house. Andrew had observed them through binoculars and determined that one window had an old-fashioned latch that looked less secure than the others. If he could reach it, he might be able to get inside without triggering the main house alarm system. But first, he had to cross 200 yards of open ground without being seen by cameras or motion sensors. Andrew studied the positions of the security equipment he could see. The motion sensors were designed to detect movement across the main lawn and around the house perimeter, but they had blind spots. By moving carefully from tree to tree, staying close to the house's foundation, he thought he could avoid detection. He moved slowly, stopping behind each piece of cover to observe and listen. A garden shed provided concealment for 50 yards. Then a large sculpture gave him another position. Step by step, he worked his way toward the house, his heart pounding with each movement. The rain was both a blessing and a curse. It helped mask the sound of his footsteps, but it also made everything slippery. When he reached the house's stone foundation, he had to move carefully to avoid losing his footing on the wet grass. The third-floor windows were 25 feet above ground level, but the house's Tudor architecture included decorative stonework and small balconies that created a natural climbing route. Andrew had studied this approach for hours through his binoculars. It was possible, but dangerous. He found the spot where a drainage pipe ran up the side of the building, providing additional handholds. The stonework was old but solid, and the decorative elements were built to last. Andrew began climbing, moving slowly and testing each grip before trusting it with his full weight. 10 feet up, 15 feet, 20 feet. His muscles burned from the effort, and the rain made everything more difficult. But he was making progress. The second-floor balcony was just above him now. That's when he heard the dogs. The barking came from somewhere around the front of the house, deep and aggressive. Andrew froze against the stone wall, his heart racing. He hadn't seen any dogs during his surveillance. Eleanor Thornwick must keep them inside, except during emergencies. The barking grew louder, and now he could hear human voices shouting. Flashlight beams swept across the grounds, much brighter than the fixed security lights. Someone had discovered his car parked on the road, or maybe a motion sensor had detected him after all. Andrew was trapped. He couldn't go down without being seen, and he couldn't stay where he was. His only option was to continue climbing and hope he could get inside the house before the search reached his position. He pulled himself up to the second-floor balcony, his arms shaking with exhaustion. The voices were getting closer now. He could hear radio chatter from security guards coordinating their search. They knew someone was on the property. The third-floor window was still 10 feet above him, but there was a decorative ledge he could use to reach it. Andrew looked down and saw flashlight beams sweeping the ground far below. There was no going back now. He stretched upward, his fingers finding the narrow stone ledge. His boots scraped against the wall as he pulled himself higher. The window was just within reach now, an old casement style with metal latches on the inside. Andrew pulled out his multi-tool and worked at the window frame, trying to find a way to open the latch from outside. The metal was old and corroded, but it seemed solid. He needed something to slip between the window and the frame. That's when the security alarm began to sound. The noise was deafening. Electronic shriek that echoed across the entire estate. Every light in the house blazed to life simultaneously, turning night into day. Andrew was fully exposed now, clinging to the side of the building like an insect on a wall. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the guards reached his position. The window latch gave way suddenly, and the casement swung inward. Without hesitation, Andrew pulled himself through the opening and tumbled onto the floor inside. He was in a narrow hallway lined with old portraits and antique furniture. Emergency lighting had activated throughout the house, casting harsh shadows on the walls. The security alarm continued its relentless wailing, but Andrew forced himself to focus. He was inside now. The study should be just down this hallway. Behind him, he could hear voices in the grounds getting closer. Someone was shouting orders about checking all the windows. He had minutes, maybe less, before they would search the house room by room. Andrew found the study door and pushed it open. The room was exactly as he had imagined, floor to ceiling, bookshelves, a massive oak desk, filing cabinets, and document boxes stacked along one wall. 70 years of Thornwick family records were somewhere in this room. He pulled out his phone and turned on its flashlight, sweeping the beam across labels and file folders. Hamilton Thornwick's papers would be in the oldest section, probably in one of the wooden filing cabinets near the window. The first cabinet he tried was locked, but his multi-tool made quick work of the simple mechanism. Inside, he found folders organized by year: 1951, 1952, 1953. His hands shook as he pulled out the 1952 folder and spread its contents on the desk. Financial records, business correspondence, personal letters. Andrew photographed everything, his phone's camera clicking rapidly. He didn't have time to read carefully, but he could see references to money problems, business difficulties, personal loans. Then he found it. A carbon copy of the promissory note his great-grandfather had signed, kept in Hamilton Thornwick's personal files. The same note Andrew had found in the county records, but this copy included handwritten notes in the margins. Notes that showed Hamilton Thornwick had acknowledged the debt and promised to repay it with interest. Andrew's phone camera captured every detail of the document. This was the proof he needed, the evidence that would force the Thornwick family to negotiate a settlement. Maria's treatment was within reach now. Footsteps in the hallway outside made him freeze. Heavy boots moving quickly, checking doors. The security team was in the house now, searching room by room. Andrew grabbed the original promissory note and stuffed it inside his jacket. He wasn't stealing it, he told himself. He was reclaiming family property that should never have been kept from them. The study door burst open as Andrew dove toward the window he had entered through. A security guard with a flashlight and radio stood in the doorway, his beam sweeping across the room. "He's here!" the guard shouted into his radio. "Third-floor study!" Andrew threw himself through the open window, not caring about the 25-foot drop to the ground below. He landed hard in a hedge, branches tearing at his clothes and scratching his face. Pain shot through his left ankle, but he forced himself to stand and run. The grounds were blazing with light now, and he could see guards running toward his position from 3 different directions. Dogs were barking somewhere behind the house. Andrew limped toward the eastern wall, following the same route he had used to enter the property. His ankle screamed with each step, but he pushed forward. Behind him, he could hear radio chatter and shouting. The guards were coordinating their pursuit, but they were still several minutes behind him. Andrew reached the wall and pulled himself up, his injured ankle making the climb much more difficult than before. At the top, he paused to look back at the estate. Every window was lit, and he could see figures moving through the grounds with flashlights and radios. He had done it. He had the evidence that could save Maria's life. But as Andrew dropped down on the other side of the wall and limped toward his car, he realized his problems were just beginning. The Thornwick family would not simply accept his claim, even with the evidence he had found. They had lawyers, money, and influence. They would fight him in every possible way. And now, he had added breaking and entering to his legal troubles. Andrew reached his car and drove away into the night, the promissory note safely in his jacket pocket. Behind him, the lights of Thornwick Estate faded into the distance, but he knew this was far from over. The real battle was about to begin. Andrew drove through the Virginia countryside for 2 hours before he felt safe enough to stop. His ankle throbbed with each press of the gas pedal, and blood from the scratches on his face had dried into dark streaks. Every time headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, his heart raced, expecting to see police cars with flashing lights. Finally, as dawn began to paint the sky pink and gold, he pulled into a truck stop outside Richmond. The parking lot was half full of 18-wheelers and early commuters getting coffee before work. Andrew limped inside, bought a cup of coffee and a first aid kit, then locked himself in the men's room to clean up. The face in the mirror looked like it belonged to a criminal. His dark hair was matted with rain and leaves, his jacket was torn in 3 places, and the scratches across his cheek were deeper than he had thought. But his eyes held something that hadn't been there before: hope. Andrew pulled the promissory note from inside his jacket and unfolded it carefully on the sink counter. Even in the harsh fluorescent light of the truck stop bathroom, the document looked authentic and official. The paper was yellowed with age, and the ink had faded to brown, but every word was still readable. I, Hamilton Thornwick, do hereby acknowledge receipt of the sum of $45,000 from Roberto Martinez, said sum to be repaid within 1 year of this date, with interest at the rate of 6% per annum. Should I predecease this obligation, said debt shall transfer to my estate, with compound interest until paid in full. The signature was clear, Hamilton Thornwick, dated March 15, 1952. But it was the handwritten note in the margin that made Andrew's pulse quicken. Roberto saved my life with this loan. We'll never forget his kindness. HT. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was personal. Hamilton Thornwick had acknowledged that Roberto Martinez had helped him during a time of crisis, and he had kept the document as a reminder of that debt. Andrew took pictures of the note with his phone, then photographed each page of the supporting documents he had captured in the study. Financial records from 1952 showing Hamilton Thornwick's business was failing, letters to banks requesting loans that were denied, personal correspondence mentioning the Mexican groundskeeper who offered to help. It was all there. A complete paper trail proving that the Thornwick family owed the Martinez family a debt that had grown to over $400,000. But Andrew knew that having the evidence was only half the battle. Eleanor Thornwick would claim the document was stolen. She would use her wealth and lawyers to delay any legal proceedings for years. And Andrew had now given her ammunition by breaking into her home. His phone rang, and Maria's name appeared on the screen. Andrew hesitated before answering. He hadn't told his sister about his plan to infiltrate the estate. She thought he was still trying to work through legal channels. Andy? I've been calling you all night. Where are you? I'm in Virginia, Andrew said, trying to keep his voice steady. I found something, Maria. Something that could change everything. What do you mean? And why do you sound so strange? Andrew closed his eyes, knowing he had to tell her the truth. I broke into the Thornwick estate last night. I found documents that prove they owe us the money for your treatment. The silence stretched for so long that Andrew thought the call had dropped. You did what? Maria's voice was barely a whisper. I had to, Maria. The lawyers were getting nowhere, and you're getting sicker. I found a copy of the original promissory note with handwritten notes from Hamilton Thornwick himself. It proves everything Grandma told us about Roberto was true. Andrew Martinez, you could go to jail. What were you thinking? I was thinking about saving my sister's life, Andrew said firmly. And it worked. I have everything we need to force them to pay what they owe us. Not like this, Maria said, and Andrew could hear tears in her voice. I won't let you destroy your life to save mine. Turn yourself in before this gets any worse. It's too late for that, Andrew said. I'm already committed. But Maria, you need to trust me. This is going to work. After he hung up, Andrew sat in his car in the truck stop parking lot, staring at the promissory note. Maria was right to be concerned. Breaking into someone's home was a felony, regardless of what he had found there. But he had come too far to turn back now. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Martinez, we need to talk. Eleanor Thornwick. Andrew stared at the message, his blood running cold. How did Eleanor Thornwick get his phone number? And how did she know he was the one who had broken into her estate? A second message appeared. I have a proposition that could benefit both of us. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in Richmond at 10 a.m. Come alone. Andrew checked the time, 8:15 a.m. The cafe was only 20 minutes away, according to his GPS. But meeting with Eleanor Thornwick seemed like walking into a trap. She could have police waiting, or private security, or lawyers with court orders. On the other hand, she was offering to talk. That suggested she might be willing to negotiate, especially if she knew about the documents he had found. Andrew made his decision. He drove to Richmond, parked 3 blocks away from the cafe, and walked the rest of the distance. His ankle was still swollen, forcing him to limp, but the pain was manageable. The Riverside Cafe was a small, upscale restaurant overlooking the James River. At 10 in the morning, only a few tables were occupied, mostly business people having late breakfast meetings. Andrew spotted Eleanor Thornwick immediately. She was sitting alone at a corner table, wearing an expensive grey suit and reading something on a tablet. She looked younger than 68, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant style and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. When she saw Andrew approaching, she gestured to the empty chair across from her. Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. Andrew remained standing. How did you get my phone number? The same way I learned about your sister's medical condition and your financial situation, Eleanor said calmly. When someone starts making legal inquiries about my family's business, I make it my business to learn about them. You've been quite persistent over the past month. You've been having me investigated? Researched, Eleanor corrected. And I must say, I'm impressed by your dedication to your sister. Breaking into my home took considerable courage, if questionable judgment. Andrew sat down slowly, keeping his hands visible on the table. Are you wearing a wire? Are there police officers outside waiting for your signal? Eleanor smiled slightly. Mr. Martinez, if I wanted you arrested, you would already be in custody. The fact that you're sitting here means I'm interested in finding a solution that doesn't involve criminal charges. A waitress appeared with coffee, which Eleanor must have ordered while waiting. Andrew accepted a cup gratefully, realizing he hadn't eaten anything since the previous day. You found something in my study, Eleanor said. Something you believe proves your grandfather was owed money by my family. Andrew pulled out his phone and showed her one of the photographs he had taken. This is a copy of the original promissory note, signed by your grandfather. It acknowledges a debt of $45,000 to Roberto Martinez, with compound interest. Eleanor studied the image on the phone screen, her expression unreadable. This document was in my husband's files, along with supporting financial records and personal correspondence. Your grandfather wrote that Roberto saved his life with that loan. May I?
Eleanor gestured toward the phone.
Andrew hesitated, then handed it over. She scrolled through several of the photographs, taking her time to read each document carefully. Finally, she handed the phone back. These documents are authentic. I recognize my grandfather's handwriting and my late husband's filing system. Andrew felt a surge of triumph, but Eleanor wasn't finished. However, she continued, the documents were obtained illegally. Any court would exclude them as evidence, and you would face criminal charges for burglary. But you can't deny that the debt exists, Andrew said. I'm not denying anything. In fact, I'm prepared to acknowledge that my grandfather may have owed your great-grandfather money. The question is what we do about it now. Andrew leaned forward. You pay what's owed. $400,000 plus reasonable interest for 70 years of non-payment. Eleanor laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Mr. Martinez, even if I accepted your calculation, which I don't, that would assume my grandfather never repaid the debt. For all we know, he paid Roberto Martinez back in cash years ago. Then where's the receipt? Where's the documentation of repayment? Lost to time, most likely. Informal loans between friends often weren't documented the way modern transactions are. Andrew felt his hopes beginning to crumble. Eleanor Thornwick was too smart, too prepared. She had probably been planning this conversation since the moment her security team found the study window open. But, Eleanor said, I'm willing to make you an offer. She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card and a check. She placed both on the table between them. $50,000, she said. More than my grandfather ever borrowed, accounting for inflation and reasonable interest. In exchange, you return any documents you may have taken from my home, sign a release acknowledging the debt is paid in full, and we never speak of this matter again. Andrew looked at the check. $50,000 was more money than he had ever seen in one place, but it wasn't nearly enough for Maria's treatment. It's not enough, he said. My sister needs $400,000 for the experimental treatment. I'm sorry about your sister's illness, Eleanor said, and she sounded genuine. But I won't be extorted, Mr. Martinez. $50,000 is a generous settlement for a 70-year-old debt that may or may not be valid. It's not extortion. It's collecting a legitimate debt. Obtained through breaking and entering, Eleanor reminded him. Don't forget, you're not exactly in a position to make demands. Andrew stared at the check, his mind racing. $50,000 would pay for some of Maria's treatment, but not the experimental therapy that could save her life. It would buy time, maybe a few more months, but not a cure. I need more time to think, Andrew said finally. Of course. But don't take too long. Eleanor stood up and left money on the table for the coffee. My offer expires at midnight tonight. After that, I'll have no choice but to press charges for the break-in. She handed him the business card. My private number. Call me with your decision. After Eleanor left, Andrew sat alone at the table, staring at the check and the business card. $50,000 or nothing. Take the settlement or face criminal charges that would destroy any chance of helping Maria. But there was something about Eleanor Thornwick's manner that bothered him. She had been too calm, too prepared, almost as if she had been expecting this confrontation for a long time. Andrew pulled out his phone and called the one person he trusted most. Andy, did you meet with her? She offered me $50,000, Maria. It's not enough for the experimental treatment, but it's something. Take it, Maria said immediately. Please, just take the money and come home. I don't want you going to jail because of me. There's something else going on here, Andrew said. She knew too much about us, about your condition. She's been watching us for weeks, maybe months. What does that matter now? You have a way out. Take it. Andrew was quiet for a long moment, watching the James River flow past the cafe windows. What if there's more money? What if the $50,000 is just what she's hoping I'll settle for? Andy, no. Don't even think about it. You've already risked enough. But Andrew was thinking about it. Eleanor Thornwick had resources he couldn't match, but she also had secrets. The documents in that study represented 70 years of family business. There might be other debts, other obligations that the Thornwick family would want to keep private. I'm going to do some more research, Andrew said. Promise me you won't break into anyone else's house. I promise. But I'm not done with this yet. After hanging up, Andrew drove to the Richmond Public Library and spent the rest of the day researching the Thornwick family history. What he found surprised him. Hamilton Thornwick hadn't been the successful businessman the family claimed. In 1952, his import business was failing, and he was deeply in debt to several creditors. The loan from Roberto Martinez hadn't just helped Hamilton Thornwick, it had saved him from bankruptcy. But more interesting was what happened after Hamilton's death in 1953. His son Charles had inherited the business and somehow turned it around almost overnight. Within 5 years, the Thornwick Import Company had become one of the most successful in Virginia. Andrew found newspaper articles from the 1950s describing Charles Thornwick's miraculous business recovery, but the articles were vague about how exactly he had managed to save the company and pay off all his father's debts. As the library closed at 9 p.m., Andrew sat in his car in the parking lot, pieces of a puzzle beginning to come together in his mind. The Thornwick family's wealth didn't come from legitimate business success. It came from something that happened in the years immediately after Hamilton's death. Something they didn't want anyone to investigate too closely. Andrew looked at Eleanor Thornwick's business card and made his decision. He wasn't going to accept $50,000 and walk away. He was going to find out what the Thornwick family was really hiding. Andrew called Eleanor Thornwick at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before her deadline expired. I need more information before I can accept your offer, he said when she answered on the second ring. What kind of information, Mr. Big Airy? Martinez? I want to know how Charles Thornwick saved the family business after his father died.
The newspaper articles from the 1950s don't give any details.
There was a long pause. That's ancient history and hardly relevant to our current discussion.
I think it's very relevant.
Hamilton Thornwick was broke when he died. His import business was failing, he owed money to multiple creditors, and his estate should have been worthless. Yet somehow, Charles paid off all the debts and turned the company into a goldmine within 5 years. Charles was a gifted businessman, or he found something valuable that his father had hidden, something worth enough to transform the family fortune overnight. Another pause, longer this time. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Martinez? I'm suggesting that my great-grandfather Roberto knew more about the Thornwick family business than anyone realized. And I think that knowledge was worth a lot more than $45,000. Eleanor's voice became cold.
You're fishing, Mr. Man.
Martinez, and you're running out of time. Do you accept my offer or not? I need to see more records. Financial documents from Charles Thornwick's era, business correspondence, anything that explains how the family fortune was really built. That's impossible. Then I guess we don't have a deal. Andrew hung up before Eleanor could respond. His hands were shaking as he set the phone down. He had just rejected $50,000 and made an enemy of one of Virginia's wealthiest families. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than anyone wanted him to discover. His phone rang immediately. Eleanor calling back. Mr. Martinez, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Perhaps we could meet again tomorrow to discuss this matter more fully. I'm listening. There are some family documents that might interest you. Private papers that have never been made public. But viewing them would require absolute discretion on your part. Andrew felt his pulse quicken. What kind of documents? The kind that could benefit both of us, if handled properly. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Colonial Hotel downtown, room 1247. The line went dead. Andrew stared at his phone, wondering if he had just made a breakthrough or walked into a trap. The next morning, Andrew drove back to Phoenix. He needed to see Maria before going any further with the Thornwick situation, and he wanted to research the family from his own computer with resources Eleanor couldn't monitor. The flight took 4 hours, and Andrew spent most of it reading everything he could find about the Thornwick family online. What he discovered reinforced his suspicions. Charles Thornwick had indeed transformed the family import business in the 1950s, but the official story didn't add up. According to the company's public history, Charles had diversified into new markets and established profitable overseas connections. But Andrew found references in old trade publications to whispers about the Thornwick company's unusual practices and questionable partnerships. One article from 1958 mentioned that federal agents had investigated the Thornwick import business for possible customs violations, but no charges were ever filed. Another piece from 1962 noted that several competitors had complained to authorities about the Thornwick company's unfair advantages in securing certain types of merchandise. By the time Andrew landed in Phoenix, he was convinced that Charles Thornwick had been involved in smuggling. The import business had been a front for bringing illegal goods into the United States, probably with the help of corrupt officials at various ports, but knowing that and proving it were different things. Andrew went straight from the airport to the hospital where Maria was receiving treatment. He found her in the oncology ward, sitting by a window reading a book. She looked thinner than when he had left for Virginia, and her skin had a pale, greyish tone that made his chest tighten with fear. "You came back," she said, smiling when she saw him. "I was worried you might do something else stupid in Virginia."
"I'm working on something that could change everything," Andrew said, sitting down beside her.
"But I need to ask you some questions about Grandma's stories." Maria marked her place in the book and gave him her full attention. "What kind of questions? Did Grandma ever mention anything about Roberto doing more than just groundskeeping at the estate? Any stories about him having special knowledge or being trusted with family secrets?" Maria frowned, thinking back. She used to say that Roberto knew things about the family that could have made him rich if he had wanted to use them. But she said he was too honorable to take advantage. "What kind of things?" "I don't know." Grandma was always vague about it. She said Roberto saw things and heard conversations that weren't meant for the help, but he never gossiped or caused trouble for anyone. Andrew leaned forward. "Maria, what if Roberto didn't just loan money to Hamilton Thornwick? What if he helped cover up something illegal? Like what?" "Smuggling. Maybe art theft or currency violations. Something that could have destroyed the family if it came to light." Maria looked troubled. "Andy, even if that were true, what difference would it make now? Everyone from that era is dead. But the evidence might still exist. And if it does, it could be worth a lot more than the money Hamilton borrowed." Andrew's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at the screen and felt his blood turn cold. The message was a photograph of Maria sitting in her hospital bed, taken through the window from outside. Below the image were the words, "Beautiful view from the parking garage. 2 p.m. tomorrow. Don't disappoint me." "Andy, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Andrew showed her the message. Maria's face went white as she understood the implications. "She's here, in Phoenix? Or she has people here?" Andrew stood up and moved to the window, scanning the parking garage across the street. "We need to call hospital security." "And tell them what? That a wealthy woman took my picture from a public parking garage? That's not illegal." But Andrew was already dialing 911. When the operator answered, he explained the situation as clearly as he could. His sister was a patient at the hospital. Someone had sent him a threatening photograph, and he was concerned for her safety. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 uniformed officers took Andrew's statement and examined the text message, but as Maria had predicted, there wasn't much they could do. Taking photographs in public wasn't a crime, and the message itself didn't contain any explicit threats. However, the officers did arrange for increased security patrols around the hospital and gave Andrew a card with the detective's contact information in case the situation escalated. After the police left, Andrew sat with Maria in her hospital room, both of them shaken by the day's events. "This is getting out of control," Maria said. "Maybe you should just forget about the Thornwick money and focus on what we can do with the insurance coverage I have. The insurance won't pay for the experimental treatment, you know that. Then maybe the experimental treatment isn't meant to be. Maybe I should accept that and make peace with whatever time I have left." Andrew took her hand. "I'm not giving up on you. But you're right that this is getting dangerous. I'm going to send you somewhere safe while I finish this. Where? Remember our cousin Elena in San Diego? The one who's a nurse? I'll call her tonight and arrange for you to stay with her for a week or two. Maria started to protest, but Andrew cut her off. This isn't negotiable. Eleanor Thornwick just proved she's willing to involve innocent people to get what she wants. I won't have you in danger because of my decisions. That evening, Andrew arranged for Maria to be transferred to a hospital in San Diego, where Elena could look after her. It would delay her treatment schedule slightly, but it would keep her safe from whatever Eleanor Thornwick was planning.
While Maria packed her few belongings, Andrew used his laptop to do more research on the Thornwick family.
This time, he focused on Charles Thornwick's business associates and the overseas connections that had supposedly made the family rich. What he found was disturbing. Several of Charles Thornwick's known business partners had been investigated by federal authorities over the years for various forms of smuggling and customs fraud. A few had even been convicted, though Charles himself was never charged with anything. But the most interesting discovery came when Andrew searched for information about the Thornwick estate itself. The property had been purchased in 1847 by Hamilton's grandfather, but it had been significantly expanded in the 1950s under Charles Thornwick's ownership. Specifically, Charles had built an extensive basement and tunnel system beneath the house, ostensibly for wine storage and as a bomb shelter during the Cold War. But the construction records Andrew found suggested the underground facility was much larger and more complex than necessary for either purpose. Andrew studied architectural drawings that had been filed with the county planning office. The basement level covered the entire footprint of the house and extended beyond it in several directions. There were multiple entrances, ventilation systems, and what appeared to be loading docks connected to the tunnel network. It looked like a facility designed for secretly moving large quantities of goods in and out of the estate. Andrew printed out copies of all the architectural drawings and construction permits. If he was right about Charles Thornwick being involved in smuggling, the basement of the estate might still contain evidence of those activities. But getting access to that evidence would require returning to Virginia and somehow getting inside the house again. This time, Eleanor Thornwick would be expecting him. His phone rang. Elena calling from San Diego. She's here safe, Elena said. Maria is settled in at the hospital here, and her new doctor seems very good. But Andrew, she's sicker than you told me. How long has she been hiding how bad things really are? Andrew closed his eyes. The doctors say 6 months without the experimental treatment, maybe less. And with the treatment, 70% chance of full recovery, but it cost $400,000. Elena was quiet for a moment. I have some savings. Maybe $15,000. It's not much, but keep your money, Elena. I'm going to get what we need. How? Andrew looked at the architectural drawings spread across his kitchen table. By finishing what I started. After hanging up with Elena, Andrew began planning his return to Virginia. This time, he wouldn't be sneaking around the estate grounds. He would be walking into whatever meeting Eleanor Thornwick had planned for him, but he would be prepared for anything she might try. Andrew spent the rest of the night researching everything he could about Eleanor Thornwick herself, her background, her business interests, her personal history. What he found was a woman who had inherited tremendous wealth, but had also built a reputation for ruthless business practices. Eleanor had been married twice, both times to men who had died in suspicious circumstances. Her first husband had fallen from the third-floor balcony of the estate in 1987. Her second husband had drowned in the James River in 2003. Both deaths were ruled accidental, but in both cases, Eleanor had inherited substantial additional wealth. Andrew printed out newspaper articles about both incidents. The details were thin, but there were enough questions raised to suggest that Eleanor Thornwick might be capable of much more than just threatening photographs. As dawn broke over Phoenix, Andrew made his final preparations for returning to Virginia. He wrote a detailed letter to Elena explaining everything he had discovered about the Thornwick family, and sealed it in an envelope with instructions to open it only if something happened to him. He also made copies of all his research and stored them in a safety deposit box at his bank, along with the original promissory note he had taken from the estate. If Eleanor Thornwick thought she could intimidate him into walking away, she was about to learn otherwise. Andrew Martinez was done running. It was time to face whatever the Thornwick family had been hiding for 70 years. Andrew arrived at the Colonial Hotel in Richmond 30 minutes early. He had spent the flight from Phoenix studying the building's layout online and planning multiple escape routes if the meeting went wrong. The hotel was downtown, surrounded by busy streets and multiple exit points, which made him feel slightly safer than meeting at the isolated estate. Room 1247 was on the 12th floor, accessible by 2 different elevators and a stairwell. Andrew took the stairs to the 11th floor, then used the elevator to go up 1 level, checking behind him constantly for anyone who might be following. The hallway outside room 1247 was empty. Andrew checked his watch. 1:55 p.m. He knocked on the door and waited. Eleanor Thornwick opened it immediately, as if she had been standing just inside. She was dressed more casually than at their cafe meeting, wearing dark slacks and a white blouse, but her manner was just as controlled and calculating.
Mr. Kepcam.
Martinez. Please come in. The hotel room was a suite with a sitting area, bedroom, and kitchenette. Eleanor gestured toward a small table where she had arranged several manila folders and what appeared to be a bottle of expensive whiskey. I thought you might need a drink for what I'm about to show you, she said. Andrew remained standing. I'm fine, thanks. What did you want to discuss? Eleanor opened the first folder and removed a black and white photograph. She placed it on the table where Andrew could see it clearly. The photograph showed 2 men standing beside a large wooden crate in what appeared to be a basement or warehouse. One of the men was clearly recognizable as a younger Charles Thornwick. The other man was older, wearing work clothes and had the weathered hands of someone who did manual labor. That's your great-grandfather, Eleanor said. Roberto Martinez. Andrew picked up the photograph, his heart racing. He had never seen a picture of Roberto, but the man in the photo had the same dark eyes and strong jawline that ran in the Martinez family. When was this taken? 1952. In the basement of our estate. Your great-grandfather was doing more than just maintaining the grounds, Mr. Martinez. He was Charles's partner in a very lucrative business. Eleanor opened the second folder and spread out several more photographs. They showed the same basement location, but with different scenes. Men loading and unloading wooden crates, examining what appeared to be artwork and sculptures, and handling stacks of documents. Art smuggling, Eleanor said. European masterpieces that were lost during the war brought into the United States without proper documentation or customs inspection. Charles provided the connections and the money. Roberto provided the expertise. Andrew studied the photographs carefully. What kind of expertise? Roberto Martinez wasn't just a groundskeeper. He was an art appraiser and restoration expert who had worked for several museums in Mexico before coming to Virginia. He could authenticate valuable pieces and detect forgeries better than most specialists. Eleanor removed another document from the folder, a handwritten letter in Spanish. This is a letter from Roberto to his wife describing some of the pieces he had examined for Charles. Paintings by Picasso and Monet, sculptures by Rodin, manuscripts and rare books worth millions in today's currency. Andrew couldn't read Spanish well enough to translate the letter completely, but he recognized enough words to understand that Roberto had been deeply involved in evaluating expensive artwork. You're saying my great-grandfather was a criminal?
I'm saying your great-grandfather was a pragmatist who saw an opportunity to provide for his family.
The $45,000 Hamilton borrowed wasn't for business expenses. It was Roberto's cut from the first shipment of recovered art. Andrew sank into one of the chairs, overwhelmed by what he was hearing. His family had always spoken of Roberto as an honest, hard-working man who had been cheated by the wealthy Thornwick family. Now Eleanor was claiming he had been an equal partner in an illegal operation.
Why are you telling me this? Andrew asked.
Eleanor sat down across from him. Because, Mr. Martinez, the art smuggling operation never ended. It evolved, became more sophisticated, and generated enormous profits for both families over the decades. But only the Thornwick side ever received their fair share. She opened a third folder, this one containing modern financial documents and bank statements. Roberto's descendants were supposed to inherit his half of the business. That was the real meaning behind the promissory note you found. It wasn't just a loan agreement. It was documentation of Roberto's partnership stake in the family enterprise. Andrew looked at the bank statements, seeing numbers that made his head spin. Monthly deposits in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, investment accounts worth millions, offshore holdings in countries he had never heard of. The Thornwick family art collection is one of the most valuable private collections in the world, Eleanor continued. Most of it is legally owned, purchased through legitimate channels over the past 70 years. But the foundation of that collection, the pieces that allowed us to establish our reputation and connections, came from Roberto's expertise in identifying and acquiring lost wartime art. But Roberto died in 1965. He never saw any of this money. No, he didn't. And neither did his son, your grandfather. The Thornwick family made a decision to keep all the profits rather than honor Roberto's partnership rights. It was theft, pure and simple. Andrew stared at Eleanor, trying to process what she was telling him. If that's true, why are you admitting it now? Why not just keep the secret buried? Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because secrets have a way of surfacing, Mr. Braygord Trestus. Martinez. Your break-in at the estate wasn't the only recent security concern. Several art pieces in our collection have been flagged by international recovery organizations as potentially stolen wartime artifacts. Insurance investigators have been asking questions. Federal agents have made informal inquiries. She paused to pour herself a glass of whiskey. The authorities are getting closer to discovering the truth about our collection's origins. When they do, the Thornwick family will face criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the forfeiture of hundreds of millions of dollars in art. So you want me to help you cover it up? On the contrary, I want you to help me legitimize it. Eleanor pulled out a final document, a legal agreement that looked like it had been prepared by expensive lawyers. This is a contract recognizing the Martinez family's historical partnership in the Thornwick art acquisition business. By signing it, you would become entitled to 50% of all proceeds from the future sale or display of art pieces acquired during Roberto's lifetime. Andrew looked at the numbers on the contract. 50% of the relevant collection was valued at over $200 million. Why would you offer me this? You could just deny everything and fight it in court for years. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Because I'm 78 years old, Mr. Martinez. I have no children, no direct heirs. When I die, the estate and everything in it will be subject to probate court and government scrutiny. If the art collection's origins are exposed then, everything will be seized and I'll be remembered as the last member of a family of art thieves. She took a sip of whiskey. But if I can legitimize the collection now by acknowledging Roberto's partnership and paying his descendants their proper share, the legal issues become much simpler. The Martinez family gets justice, the Thornwick family preserves its reputation, and everyone profits. Andrew read through the contract more carefully. It was complex, full of legal terminology he didn't fully understand. But the basic premise was clear. Eleanor would acknowledge Roberto Martinez as Charles Thornwick's equal partner in acquiring valuable art between 1952 and 1965, and Andrew would inherit Roberto's 50% stake in those specific pieces. This would pay for Maria's treatment and leave me wealthy for the rest of my life, Andrew said. It would pay for treatment for 100 people like your sister. The Martinez family would never have to worry about money again. But something about Eleanor's manner bothered Andrew. She was being too generous, too willing to share wealth that she could probably protect through legal maneuvers and delays. What's the catch? He asked. Eleanor finished her whiskey before answering. You would have to help me dispose of the most problematic pieces in the collection, the ones that are most likely to be identified as stolen wartime art. We would need to quietly sell them through private channels before the authorities can seize them. You're asking me to help you fence stolen artwork. I'm asking you to help me resolve a 70-year-old injustice in a way that benefits everyone involved. The alternative is years of legal battles that will destroy both our families and ultimately result in the government seizing everything. Andrew stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Richmond skyline. What Eleanor was proposing would solve all of his immediate problems. Maria would get her treatment, his family's financial struggles would be over, and he would be wealthy beyond anything he had ever imagined. But it would also make him a partner in covering up decades of art theft and fraud. I need time to think about this, Andrew said. Of course, but not too much time. The federal investigators I mentioned are scheduled to examine our collection next week. If we're going to legitimize Roberto's partnership, it needs to happen before then. Eleanor gathered up the documents and photographs, leaving only the contract on the table. Keep this copy. Study it carefully. But remember, Mr. Martinez, this offer may not be available much longer. As Andrew reached for the contract, his phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was unknown, but the message made his blood run cold. Your sister had a setback at the hospital in San Diego. Might want to check on her soon. Andrew showed the message to Eleanor. She read it with an expression of concern that looked genuine. Mr. Martinez, I hope you don't think I had anything to do with that. Threatening sick people is not how I conduct business. Then who sent this? Eleanor frowned. I'm afraid there may be other parties interested in keeping our family's secrets buried. People who would prefer that you and I never reach an agreement. What kind of people? The kind who have been profiting from the current arrangement for decades. Art dealers, auction houses, private collectors who have knowingly purchased stolen pieces. If our collection's origins are exposed, It could trigger investigations into the entire international art market. Andrew felt a chill of fear. Are you saying there are people who would hurt Maria to stop me from accepting your offer? I'm saying that you and your sister are now involved in something much larger than a simple debt dispute. There are billions of dollars at stake, and some people will do anything to protect their interests. Eleanor handed Andrew a business card with a different phone number than the one she had given him before. This is a secure line. Call me when you've made your decision, but don't wait too long. The longer this situation remains unresolved, the more dangerous it becomes for everyone involved. After Eleanor left, Andrew sat alone in a hotel room staring at the contract that could solve all his problems, but his phone kept buzzing with news updates about his sister. According to Elena, Maria had developed a severe infection and had been moved to the intensive care unit. She was stable but critical. Andrew booked the next flight to San Diego, his mind racing with everything Eleanor had told him. The Thornwick family's wealth was built on stolen art. His great-grandfather had been a willing partner in the crime. And now unknown enemies were threatening Maria to prevent the truth from coming out. But as the plane lifted off from Richmond, Andrew realized that Eleanor had made one critical mistake in her presentation. She had assumed that fear and greed would be enough to secure his cooperation. She had underestimated how far Andrew Martinez would go to protect his sister and uncover the complete truth about his family's history. The war for the Thornwick legacy was just beginning. Andrew arrived at the San Diego hospital to find Maria in the intensive care unit, connected to multiple machines and fighting for her life. Elena met him in the hallway outside her room, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. The infection came on suddenly, Elena explained as they walked toward Maria's room. Her immune system is too weak from the chemotherapy. The doctors are doing everything they can, but... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Andrew could see through the glass window that his sister was dying. Without the experimental treatment, her body was losing the battle against the cancer. And now, with the infection complicating everything, even that treatment might not be enough to save her.
Has anyone else been here asking questions? Anyone who seemed unusual or out of place? Elena frowned.
There was a man yesterday who claimed to be from your insurance company.
He wanted to review Maria's file and ask questions about her treatment options. I thought it was strange because he didn't have any identification, and insurance representatives usually call first. What did he look like? Tall, well-dressed, had an expensive briefcase. He said he was trying to expedite approval for experimental treatments, but when I asked him to wait while I called the insurance company to verify, he left quickly. Andrew felt anger building in his chest. Someone was investigating Maria's medical situation, probably looking for leverage to use against him. The same people who had sent the threatening text message. He spent the rest of the day at Maria's bedside, holding her hand and talking to her even though she was unconscious. The doctors explained that the next 48 hours would be critical. If they could get the infection under control, she might stabilize enough to resume treatment. If not, that evening, as Andrew sat in the hospital cafeteria trying to force himself to eat something, his phone rang. Eleanor Thornwick. Mr. Martinez, I heard about your sister's condition. I'm very sorry. How did you hear about it? I have contacts at several medical facilities. When someone with your sister's insurance profile is admitted to intensive care, certain people take notice. Andrew gripped the phone tighter. What people? The same people who sent you that text message yesterday. Art dealers who have been quietly selling pieces from collections like ours for decades. They're afraid that if our arrangement becomes public, it will trigger investigations that could expose the entire network. Eleanor paused. They're also the people who could make your sister's infection much worse if they chose to. The implication hit Andrew like a physical blow.
Are you saying they could hurt her directly?
In the hospital? I'm saying that hospital security isn't perfect, and Maria's weakened immune system makes her very vulnerable to additional infections. It would be tragic if she were exposed to something that prevented her recovery. Andrew stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. Several people in the cafeteria turned to stare, but he didn't care. If anyone touches my sister, they won't. If you sign the contract I offered you. In fact, I can guarantee that Maria will receive the best possible medical care and immediate access to the experimental treatment she needs.
How?
The same medical network that's been monitoring her case includes some of the best oncologists in the country. With the right connections and financial backing, your sister could be transferred to a private facility within hours and begin the experimental therapy immediately. Andrew closed his eyes, feeling trapped between impossible choices. And all I have to do is help you sell stolen artwork. You would be helping to resolve a historical injustice while saving your sister's life. I think Roberto would understand that choice. After hanging up, Andrew walked back to Maria's room and found Elena waiting for him. "Andy, I need to tell you something," she said. "I've been thinking about that man who came asking questions yesterday. There was something familiar about him." "Familiar how?" "I think I've seen him before, at the art gallery where I used to work part-time when I was in nursing school. He was a buyer who specialized in European pieces, always paid in cash, never asked too many questions about provenance." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Andrew a photograph. "I found this on the gallery's old website. Is this the same man you're dealing with?" The photograph showed a group of people at a gallery opening. In the background, Andrew could see a tall, well-dressed man who matched Elena's description of the insurance investigator. But more importantly, he recognized the man from other research he had done. It was James Morrison, one of the art dealers Eleanor had mentioned as being involved in the network of people buying and selling questionable pieces. "Elena, I need you to do something for me. Call hospital security and tell them that no one is allowed to visit Maria except immediate family. No insurance representatives, no medical consultants, no one you don't personally know." "Andy, what's going on? Who are these people?" Andrew quickly explained everything that had happened over the past week. The break-in at the estate, Eleanor's offer, the revelation about Roberto's involvement in art smuggling, and the threats from unknown parties who wanted to keep the arrangement secret. Elena listened with growing concern. "So you're saying that Maria's illness is being used as leverage in some kind of international art theft conspiracy?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think the only way to protect her is to expose the whole thing." But even as Andrew said it, he knew that exposing the conspiracy would take time, and Maria didn't have time. She needed treatment immediately, and Eleanor Thornwick was offering the fastest way to get it. Andrew made his decision. He called Eleanor back. "I'll sign the contract, but I have conditions. I'm listening. First, Maria gets transferred to the best medical facility available tonight. The experimental treatment starts immediately, and she receives round-the-clock protection until she's completely recovered." Agreed. "Second, I want complete documentation of every piece of art in the collection, including its origin and current value. I'm not signing anything blind. That will take some time to compile, but it can be arranged. Third, I want to know the names of everyone involved in this network. The dealers, the auction houses, the private collectors. Everyone." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Polly Martinez, that information could be very dangerous. These people have invested decades building this system. They won't appreciate having their names revealed. Then they shouldn't have threatened my sister." "Very well. I'll provide the information you requested. But you'll need to come back to Virginia to finalize everything. The contract needs to be signed in the presence of witnesses and notarized to be legally binding. When?" "Tomorrow night. I'll arrange for Maria's transfer this evening." Within 3 hours, Maria was being moved to a private medical facility in La Jolla, one of the most exclusive treatment centers in California. The facility specialized in experimental cancer therapies and had a success rate far higher than any regular hospital. As the ambulance pulled away with Maria inside, Elena turned to Andrew. "I hope you know what you're doing. I'm saving my sister's life and getting justice for our family. Everything else is secondary." But as Andrew boarded his flight back to Virginia that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a situation far more complex and dangerous than Eleanor had revealed. The next evening, Andrew met Eleanor at a law office in downtown Richmond. The lawyer, a distinguished man in his 60s named Harrison Webb, had prepared multiple copies of the partnership agreement along with dozens of supporting documents. "Mr. Martinez, before you sign anything, I want to make sure you understand the full scope of what you're agreeing to," Webb said. "This contract recognizes the Martinez family as equal partners in the acquisition of 47 specific art pieces between 1952 and 1965. Your share of their current value is approximately $215 million. Andrew looked at the list of artwork. Paintings by Picasso, Monet, Renoir, and Van Gogh. Sculptures by Rodin and Degas. Manuscripts and rare books worth millions each. He recognized some of the names from his research into art stolen during World War II. "How many of these pieces were actually stolen during the war?" Andrew asked. Eleanor and Webb exchanged glances. "That's difficult to determine," Webb said carefully.
The documentation from that era is incomplete, and the legal status of many wartime acquisitions is complex. Give me a number."
Eleanor sighed. Based on current international databases of missing artwork, approximately 30 of the pieces on that list are classified as possibly looted, or ownership disputed.
But classification doesn't prove theft, and many of the original owners are deceased with no known heirs. And the other 17 pieces? Legitimately acquired through documented sales and estate auctions. Andrew studied the contract more carefully, noting clauses about confidentiality, dispute resolution, and his responsibilities as a partner in managing the collection.
One section caught his attention. The partners agreed to cooperate in the discreet disposal of any pieces that may pose legal or reputational risks to the collection as a whole. This clause about disposing of risky pieces, Andrew said.
What exactly does it mean? Some of the works may eventually be claimed by governments or international recovery organizations, Webb explained.
Rather than face lengthy legal battles that could expose the entire collection, the partnership agreement allows for those pieces to be quietly sold through private channels, meaning they would be sold to other private collectors who don't ask questions about provenance, meaning they would be sold to parties willing to accept responsibility for any future ownership disputes, Eleanor corrected. Andrew understood. The stolen art would be passed along to other wealthy collectors, keeping it in private hands and away from museums or governments that might ask uncomfortable questions about its history. But Maria was receiving treatment at that moment because of this arrangement. The experimental therapy had already begun, and according to the doctors, her response was positive. Andrew signed the contract. As Webb notarized the documents and Eleanor transferred the first installment of Andrew's partnership share, $50 million, to an account Webb had established, Andrew felt both triumph and unease. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said as they prepared to leave the law office. "The federal investigators I mentioned will be visiting the estate next week. Your signature on this partnership agreement will help legitimize our collection, but they may still ask questions about individual pieces." "What kind of questions?" "They'll want to know how we acquired certain works, whether we can document legitimate ownership, and whether we've been cooperating with international efforts to return stolen art to its rightful owners." Eleanor handed Andrew a folder filled with prepared statements and suggested answers. "If they contact you, these responses will help ensure that our arrangement remains legal and binding." Andrew looked through the prepared statements, realizing that he was being asked to lie to federal investigators about the origins of stolen artwork. "And if I refuse to give these answers?" Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. "Then our partnership would be dissolved. Your sister's medical treatment would become your responsibility again, and certain parties might become concerned about what you know regarding their business activities." The threat was subtle but clear. Andrew had committed himself to a course of action that he couldn't easily escape. Over the next week, Andrew split his time between visiting Maria in California and managing his new responsibilities as a partner in one of America's most valuable art collections. Maria's condition was improving dramatically, the experimental treatment was working, and her doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. But Andrew's sense of unease was growing. The more he learnt about the art collection's true scope, the more he realized that Eleanor had only revealed a small part of the operation. The Thornwick estate was just one node in a vast network of dealers, collectors, and auction houses that had been trafficking in stolen and disputed artwork for decades. When the federal investigators finally arrived at the estate, Andrew was there to meet them. Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's art crime team and Dr. Marcus Weber from the State Department's Office of Holocaust Issues examined several pieces in the collection, while Andrew and Eleanor provided documentation of their partnership. "Mr. Martinez," Agent Chen said after reviewing the partnership agreement, "can you tell us about your great-grandfather's role in acquiring these pieces?" Andrew gave the answers Eleanor had prepared, explaining that Roberto Martinez had been an art expert who helped Charles Thornwick identify valuable works available for purchase in the post-war period. "And you have no knowledge of any pieces in the collection that may have been looted during the war?" "No knowledge," Andrew lied. "Dr. Spy Fossa." Weber examined several of the paintings more closely, taking detailed photographs and notes. "Some of these pieces match descriptions in our database of missing artwork. We may need to return for a more thorough investigation." After the investigators left, Eleanor seemed satisfied with how the meeting had gone. "Your great-grandfather would be proud," she told Andrew. "You've secured justice for your family while protecting the collection he helped build." But Andrew didn't feel proud. He felt complicit in a crime that had been continuing for 70 years. That night, alone in his hotel room, Andrew made a decision that would change everything. He called Agent Chen's direct number. "Agent Chen, this is Andrew Martinez. I need to tell you the truth about the Thornwick art collection." Over the next hour, Andrew revealed everything. Roberto's real role in the smuggling operation, Eleanor's admission that many pieces were stolen, the network of dealers and collectors involved in trafficking looted art, and the threats that had been made against his family. Mr. Blink peers, Martinez, what you're describing is conspiracy to traffic in stolen cultural property, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possibly much more. Are you willing to cooperate with our investigation? My sister is dying, Andrew said. The money from this partnership is paying for her treatment. If I cooperate with you, Eleanor Thornwick will cut off the funding. We may be able to help with that. The FBI has victim assistance programs, and if your great-grandfather was defrauded by the Thornwick family, there could be grounds for civil recovery. Andrew looked out the hotel window at the lights of Richmond. Agent Chen, I want to do the right thing, but I need guarantees that my sister will continue receiving treatment regardless of what happens to Eleanor or the art collection. I can't make promises about specific outcomes, but I can tell you that the Justice Department takes family extortion very seriously. If someone threatened your sister to secure your cooperation, that's a federal crime. Andrew made his choice. I'll cooperate fully, but I want protective custody for my sister until this is resolved. Agreed. The next morning, federal agents simultaneously raided the Thornwick estate, Eleanor's law office, and the private storage facilities where additional artwork was kept. They also arrested James Morrison and 6 other art dealers who had been identified in Eleanor's records. Eleanor Thornwick was charged with conspiracy to traffic stolen cultural property, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and extortion. The charges carried a potential sentence of 40 years in federal prison. Andrew testified before a federal grand jury, providing details about the smuggling operation and the network of dealers who had profited from stolen art for decades. His testimony helped investigators trace the movement of hundreds of pieces of looted artwork through private collections around the world. The investigation revealed that the Thornwick collection was just one part of a massive international network that had been operating since the end of World War II. Stolen art worth billions of dollars had been laundered through legitimate auction houses and galleries, with many pieces eventually ending up in private collections or even major museums. Maria's treatment continued under federal protection funded by the Victim Assistance Program and eventually by civil settlements from the dealers who were prosecuted. She made a complete recovery and returned to teaching, using her experience to advocate for other families facing medical crises. The original promissory note that had started Andrew's investigation became a key piece of evidence in establishing that Roberto Martinez had been defrauded by the Thornwick family. A federal judge ruled that Roberto's descendants were entitled to compensation, but from the legitimate portions of the family's wealth, not from the stolen artwork. Eleanor Thornwick was ultimately sentenced to 25 years in.